Hello and welcome to another Office 365 Hours. My name is Christian Buckley and I'm the Brand Alliance Director at AvePoint and a Microsoft MVP and Regional Director. And I'm joined today by Shari Oswald, a Microsoft Certified Trainer, an international speaker and author, and the founder of Power Up Learning. Good morning, Shari.
Good morning, Christian. How are you today?
I'm doing well. It's great when we can hear each other.
I know.
It makes communication so much easier. I
know. Trying to respect the ambiance, right?
Yes, that's
nice,
right. That's right.
Nice shirt, by the way. Throwback there.
That's right. It is a throwback, and I do this one because it's one of the ones that I have that was also sponsored by AvePoint. So
that's awesome.
Well, so today I'm excited to get into this topic. We're discussing the topic of when not to use Microsoft Teams. And yeah, so it's a bit clickbaity of a title.
Yeah, it's a little bit, we might step in it a little bit here, but I think it's always best to discuss the sharpest tool for the job, right?
I think that's the point. It's like, this is a good neutral topic. Like, we are huge advocates for, of course, the Microsoft technology stack. And I'm a huge fan of Microsoft Teams, and we're not telling people not to go use Teams, but it really is, to your point, it's about using the right tool for the right job. So, yeah.
This is an interesting one. I'm excited about this, though. I think it's good to give people different ideas, right?
I think so too. I also, that makes me think of a conversation I had. So Microsoft VP that owns SharePoint and Teams and Yammer, Jeff Teeper, remember talking to him about one of the things that he was trying to change about the way people were looking at SharePoint. And historically, SharePoint is just an example, but SharePoint was talked about by the community as being a Swiss Army knife solution. And Jeff talked about this. So this is something we need to change. We need to change that perception. And it comes down to, like, can I use SharePoint to go create a ticketing system for my company? You can do that, but should you do that? No.
Yeah, no.
Well, that's the same way I look at this topic and I say, look, there's a lot of things that we could use Teams for, but should we? And so I'd love to just go through some of those scenarios.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely.
So what do we talk about? Like, so document management, is Teams the best place for document management?
I have a very specific opinion on this, because if you know the structure that's underlying Teams, of course, it's on SharePoint. That's the foundation of it. And what I see often, and way too often, is people take everything that's in their M drive, their J drive, their K drive, and they dump it into their Teams library. And they don't realize that underneath Teams is a SharePoint library. For every channel, there's a folder. So now you've taken thousands of documents and you've dumped them into one library. And now you've got issues with search because it's going to be slow. So my opinion is those libraries in Teams should be work in process. But behind the scenes in SharePoint, you've got the ample space to create additional libraries where you could store that content once it's done. Once you've checked it off, it's completed, you move it somewhere else, and then you can control versions and people locking it down so people can't edit it anymore. That's a big one, right? Because everything in Teams is editable by everybody. So yeah, that SharePoint library behind the scenes is the secret ticket, I think, to being most proficient in working with the best tool.
Well, and that's something that, talking specifically around, organizations need to have some level of expertise in migration activities, because, even if you do dump all of the content over into that single library, and maybe you don't have the, gigabytes of information, and it's a smaller organization, it's not that much content, and so that works without impacting performance. But the reality is that projects close down and shift and new things open up. There's constant moving of that content. People leave organizations, new people come in. You want to structure things differently. You want to reuse some of that content. You want to archive other content. And so one of the mistakes that's made, I think organizations were getting really good at life cycle management, retention policies, all those things in the SharePoint world. And a lot of clients had just abandoned all of that and went to the flat of Teams without thinking of those kinds of consequences.
Yeah, absolutely. Teams has three primary functions: communication, collaboration, and creating and sharing content together. And that content is one, I think, it's by the wayside. They don't really plan it out. They don't think about it. It's information architecture, and it needs to be addressed sooner than later, because I'm the one that gets called in to clean up the mess they made, because now they can't find anything in the new space either. And that's not helpful.
Well, another area where a lot of SharePoint overlap is around lists. And so I know SharePoint lists that have been around a long time, and it's one of the, document libraries and lists, the two primary, functions within SharePoint, outside of, team sites themselves, that structure, but is lists. And so a lot of things, it's there's that joke of somebody sends you an email and hey, could this email have been a Teams meeting? There's a lot of data. It's like, well, we have this data, we have a small database, or we have data that's in a spreadsheet. It's like, could this spreadsheet be a list? It's kind of a sub joke running, and I think we can just so much that we could do and powerful about that list. Now we have, the list capability, the Microsoft list capability through Teams. Is that the best place for lists?
And again, it's stored in SharePoint, right? And if you look at the capability, if you add a list to a tab in Teams, very basic capability, but you peek behind the curtain, go into SharePoint, and now I can customize that list. I can create workflows around it, automations around it, tie it to a Power App or a Power Automate. And, you can't see that from Teams. It's pretty much, add or remove information on a list, and that's it. You don't have the ability to make that more robust and more flexible. That all that happens in Teams. So, I'm sorry, in SharePoint in the list, because that's the best kept secret, right? They're calling a Microsoft list like it's new, but they've been around for 20 years. Right. And and it's been my baby for about 18 so of those 20. Okay. So now my baby's just prettier.
Yeah, it has nice front, nice packaging.
Yeah.
So no, I use it a lot on a daily basis. I live inside of lists, and so it's just an important thing. But when I want that robust capabilities, and one of the first things I do is I open up the SharePoint view of it. I go look at it from that perspective.
Yeah, and a scenario behind that, I had a client that she sent out a spreadsheet to 50 different people trying to collect information in a specific format. They took it upon themselves, all those 50 people took it upon themselves to put information in that Excel spreadsheet and email it back to her, moved columns around, added new columns. Now she has to try and smush 50 different versions of her spreadsheet back together. And I'm like, why wasn't this a SharePoint list? Why didn't we make this a list? And then we can control it a little bit more so that it's not this. It took her, honestly, it took her like 36 hours to put those back together, a whole week's work that didn't need to be lost. So,
well, I just like to preface it with that technical term of shmush. I think that is the official terminology for merging and normalizing that. Yes.
Well, I don't want to get too technical, right? Everybody understands the smush, right?
Well, that's actually a great segue for the next topic around external communication and collaboration. And so there are so many different scenarios where, and I hate using the phrasing, and Microsoft doesn't like the whole which tool when, scenario. Yeah. There's a number of ways that you can go and do that. I know that one of the, inside my organization within AvePoint, we are strictly, guard the teams that are, have external guests. And so we have a very strict policies around that. So we're very security minded. And it's even things that are improved, like I run the community champions team. There is a regular review. There's a cycle where they come back where I'm reauthorized for maintaining that external site and the types of collaboration that are happening inside there. So is Teams the best setup for that external communication and collaboration.
Well, and I hate to use that lawyerly response of it depends, right? But the gamut, I've been working a lot with the federal government in the last 2 years, and they lock everything down. It really depends on what the company has implemented as far as their security protocols and what they allow their external users to do. So I'm finding, even as a member of an association, I'm on the board, and our team is so locked down, I can't even add a tab. So I'm the sponsorship chair, and I want to add a tab to track my sponsors. I can't do that because of the way it's locked down. I'm a guest, right? And I think sometimes it's better to have that external. If you have to work externally, there are other tools, unfortunately, that are a little bit more open, because security is really important. We want to keep our data secure. Having another place sometimes is a necessity to ensure that we can still be productive in a controlled environment that's not locked down to where we're handcuffed and can't get our job done. So, yeah.
Well, for some of those like that I have it again, where I don't need to have the complexity and the overhead of a team for that anyway, where
Right.
it's the occasional email and that there's like 3 of us that need to collaborate on something, where I actually share a link that's secure via OneDrive.
Right.
And that's so that we have 1 or 2 different documents that we're collaborating on. We don't need to have the real time. We don't need the other, the other benefits of Teams and the meetings and things that are around that. It really just is a collaboration around these assets for a set amount of time. That's all we need to go and do. So to go and create a team and build all of that out for something where that tool set, email, OneDrive link, fits the need.
Well, and that actually came up. I'm collaborating with another partner right now, and I'm creating a proposal, and I have access to his tenant, but I don't have access to add files to his tenant. I don't have permission to do that, but I do in my OneDrive. I'm moving from my contracts where I store my proposals, a copy of that into OneDrive so that we can collaborate on it, and then eventually I'm gonna have to move it back, because I don't want to open up, my whole contracts thing to one partner or all my partners. I don't want them, they don't need to see each other, who else I'm working with. So yeah, there's lots of scenarios around that where we just need to knock out a document, and OneDrive can be less locked down from SharePoint and Teams, so they can open that up and you can share, and you don't have to worry about letting people into your Teams environment.
Right. Well, and there are scenarios where if you're going to have active, regular communication, where you can go and even to the extent of federating your environments to make it easier to be able to mention and collaborate and chat with people. And there's different versions of federation around that. Like as a partner to Microsoft, we have a federated environment, but it doesn't mean that I have access to Microsoft personnel, like their gal being able to go and send emails like that. That's not possible. But we have a shared tenant, and so anybody that I interact with that I'm a member of, invited to one of those teams, that I can chat as needed with them, and I can more easily invite them into new teams, and they can invite us over there. So that's something where long-term ongoing relationship, we're constantly collaborating at different levels, and to have that level of federation, again, that may be overkill for a lot of external communication collaboration needs.
Well, it's also essential. We have I worked with several, we'll just call them 3-letter agencies last year that needed to talk to each other. They needed to be able to see each other, and they have a lot of crossover in their functionality, but because the government cloud is so locked down, they weren't able to do that, and it hindered their ability to do their job. So now they're reverting to outside sources that they probably shouldn't be using, right? So not ghost IT is not a good thing. We don't.
Well, that's why it's good to have the conversation and understand why, hey, we're locked down for a reason. And when you then go use an unauthorized, solution, a cloud solution that's out there, that's outside of our system, then it causes a whole slew of other, additional potential problems. Well, one other area where I know that there's a lot of pushback on Teams is around webinars. Now, I know that there's, Teams, events versus meetings. And so there's some things, and we've participated together in community activities where we've hosted it all and done it via a Teams meeting. And we've done like live streams where we want to do like our AMA or Ask Me Anything community panel discussions. And we wanted to make that readily available and live stream out to YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and wherever else. We wanted to make that available, and that was great for that. But sometimes with webinars are much more structured and locked down, where you want to have a registration process. You want to be able to know metrics on who attended, level of activity, what was shared, was visibility. You want to restrict who can have access, who can even be invited or attend that. I mean, all those kinds of things. Is Teams the best place to have that kind of structured webinar?
They're building out the webinar capability, and the ability to register and make people register is one thing, and that's great. But I want to be able to limit how many people can register. I don't want 2,000 people showing up at my webinar. And so that, to me, that's one. And then also, I like to have my webinars available on demand, but I want them to register because there's a reason we have those webinars, right? We're trying to capture our audience and potentially, open up opportunities for ourselves as well. We don't do them just out of the goodness of our heart. So being able to capture the registration, but also, that's one point in time. What about, 2 weeks from now, if somebody missed it? Can they go back? In Teams, I would have to make that public or find another, app. I'd have to download it from Teams, put it somewhere else, because I can't let them replay it in Teams unless I, again, invite them into my environment. So, I feel the need. I do my webinars in Zoom because Zoom, that's all they do. Sometimes it's using the best tool for the job. Zoom just does webinars. Microsoft is trying to meet the need for collaboration, not just webinars.
Well, it's the enterprise needs versus, webinar, which is all external, for those needs. For the day in, the day out, for the meetings, like I'm live within Teams, everything is within Teams meetings. But so I'm also a paid Zoom user that I do for when I do interviews and things, because it's also with all of the other overhead that Teams has, and it's incredibly powerful for all of those other functions. Zoom has better video and audio quality for recordings for a one-on-one interview. So I don't have that overhead. It doesn't do the 50 other things that I need to do in a day, or for project and for kind of all of those other related contextual activities. But for that single purpose need, for a webinar or a web recording, an interview, that side of it, like I go to the tool that works best at the right price point. And there are other solutions that are out there, which I think are already also getting their lunch eaten by Zoom in that category, just because of the price point. But now, having said that, if for the majority of the use that I have out of Zoom, if Microsoft improved the quality of the video and the audio for the recordings, I would stop paying for Zoom and use it for that. However, for webinars, like for my company to go and do, for all of the reasons that you've done and a number of other reasons why, it's, Microsoft is not yet ready for prime time in the webinar space.
And do they need to be? That's my question. Why does Microsoft
said it like they're not the business, right? That's not their business to go and do. They are an enterprise solution, and that's what we just have to remember. That's why, again, I can build a ticketing system in SharePoint. Should I? No, I'll go purchase a ticketing system that can do not just the baseline limp along capabilities, but robust all of the other things that I need. It's the same with the webinar platform.
Yeah, should Microsoft invest their time and their resources in trying to be everything to everyone, or should they should concentrate on their collaboration, because that's what they do. That's why, right? So let's do that, and not, I always, when I used to walk into like a Microsoft building and I had an iPad at one point, I'm like, are the God's going to come down and strike me because I have an iPad, right? But now we're device agnostic. So it's not necessarily something that has to be addressed as far as, being everything to everybody, doing everything. No, let Microsoft focus on collaboration, and let Zoom focus on their stuff. And each of us needs to just use the sharpest tool for the job at the time that we need it. That's my opinion.
Well, the last category here that I want to discuss was around building external communities. And it's a great example. So another leading competitor in one category, Slack. So I'm involved in a lot of community activities. So I live for here where I am in Utah, we have Silicon Slopes. So Lehigh, the city where I live, is also the kind of the tech hub of the state. So all of the community efforts that I'm a member of, I'm in like a dozen different Slack teams.
Yeah.
And so I don't use it for work related, but for the community side of things, that's what I go in and use. So, for building external communities, I think we've talked about it. We're kind of repeating ourselves with all those capabilities, but again, I'll ask the question, is Teams the right platform for building external communities?
Because we do have the Microsoft Community Platform. And again, I have to join specifically from that profile, into that team for a meeting, or else I'm locked down. And again, they have to maintain security, and that's what's most important. But probably not. I think there's some more collaborative ways that we can work together. And things like Meetup. One of the things I like about Meetup is that Meetup also suggests other communities that I might be a part of. Teams doesn't do that. And truly, community is about community, sharing information. And like, if I'm an M365 group here, you might want to be in the Power Apps user group here. And those are hosted in other platforms that I think are, kind of cross promote each other. So I think that's one purpose for that, but for sure. And then, Yammer could be, but
Yammer has some of the same issues. It really should be as simple as the bar for building communities should be as low as possible to get people in and share information. Like we just had our local user group meeting this week, and for that there are no anonymous access. You had to go and be part of it. It was via Teams meeting. So we knew that everybody was invited, but there's a little more of a barrier to get in there. They couldn't be anonymous. They had to go register for that. And they get sent an invite for that. But to have to log in and register for accessing information, which should be on a website, like it should be super easy for community to make information accessible, to share, to err on that side of things. If people want to take the next step and join an in-person meeting or activity or go to another event, you might have other requirements there. But for so much of it, it's supposed to be transparent. It's supposed to be out in the open and shareable. And so if you put barriers, if you put everything behind the firewall, that's going to filter out a percentage of people who would otherwise go and investigate and then maybe get involved more over the long term.
And on the flip side of that, people that, being an evangelist for Microsoft, because that's what I am. That's how I feel like what I do. You want to represent Microsoft tools in the best light. And if their first exposure to Microsoft Teams is a lockdown meeting where they can't interact, they can't chat, they can't raise their hand because of the way it's locked down, that's not a good experience. And people aren't going to adopt a technology that's too hard to use. So we want to make sure we present it well. Right.
You just nailed a scenario that I've run into so many times where people come in that are newer to Teams and they're like, why can't I do the chat? Why can't I see this feature? Everybody else is able to go and do that. Why did I get that message? Or, and so it's an inconsistent experience depending on the level of permissions, who invited you in, where you joined, which profile that you were logged in as to be able to join that.
Web versus desktop.
Right. So again, it's that whole, the community open. It's the HTML version of it. We just want a website, a WordPress website up there, share the information that's out there. We want to have some baseline collaboration capabilities that Meetup provides, or use Eventbrite for registration, and kind of all these lightweight, easy to use things versus an enterprise scale, secure, more manageable, managed experience is just a different scenario.
Right. Exactly. And, I think what it really boils down to across the board is who are you trying to work with and what are you trying to accomplish? And I think too often we don't ask the question to begin with of what's the business challenge? What's your problem? Let's fix your problem. And
let's fix your problem. That's what we should do. That'll really go well with my wife. I'm going to tell my wife, let's fix your problems. So that's you.
I don't recommend that as a wife. I don't recommend.
That's what I said. That's what. So the last question was you were kind of venturing into that is, so how should organizations approach whether to use Teams or not? Like, how do you approach that whole which tool to use and when dilemma?
It all depends on who you're trying to work with and what you're trying to accomplish. But there's also some other considerations like retention policies. This is coming up with some of the small local governments that we're working with. They don't want to retain chat over 24 hours or even a week. They want it to delete because they don't want to be exposed to the, possible discovery of that content.
Yeah, right.
And so if you want them to collaborate, guess what? You just cut them off. Right. So do we go back to Outlook? Do we go back to email for those conversations that they have emails for 20 years, but they don't want to keep a chat for, 4 days. So right. let's give them, talk through the business scenarios and make those decisions based on, what are all of the factors, not just what's shiny and new or unfortunately what got lobbed over the fence at them in the last few years, right? This is what they had here, use this for meetings. And they don't understand everything that's available to them or how to use it properly. The companies need to make those decisions.
That's the key, is having the conversation around that. It's like you could have a forum with checkdowns of what are the functionality, what functionality do you need for this collaboration, and so you can kind of walk them through that process, but have a conversation about what are you really trying to do here, what's essential for this. The answer might be slightly different. So if all you're doing is that drop down list of that form to fill out, you can just apply a technical solution that answers all of those different pieces, may not actually fit the need or the long-term needs of the business, but have a conversation. That's the hardest part. We have to talk to each other as people.
I know. We've gotten away from that too, especially I think as the generation that texts everything across the room from each other. My kids are notorious for that. They're across the room and they're texting each other. I'm like, talk to each other. Yeah. Right? We've lost that, and now unfortunately that we've been isolated for a couple of years. I think it's not getting any better. So we need to
work on that. Talk people. Well, it's been great talking with you, Shari. So again, Shari Oswald, thank you for joining this morning. If you have not already done so, if you're watching this, please subscribe to Office 365 Hours to get notifications about all of our upcoming shows, which are the first and third Wednesday of every month. Always in the mornings at 11 a.m. Eastern. So thank you, Shari. Thank you for watching.
Thank you for having me. Have a great day.